So if you've used Google at any point, you've done the typical surname searching and things like that, but there are so many features to Google that I want to talk about that you might not have been utilizing to really push your genealogy to that next level. So I'm going to start out by talking about Google search strategies, but at the same point, I want to talk about some of the specific features that Google has to offer as well. So some of you may have used Google Books already. There's Google Maps, there's their newspaper collection, and then there's Google Images, and there's Google Photos. And I'm going to talk about those briefly at the end as a way to really kind of not only store your own information, but also to share that information as well. So a couple of weirdities, a couple of oddities that go into Google is that when you do a search result in Google, it just kind of throws 8 million or 120 million us when we're using the product ourselves. So it's great to put in your surname, or it's great to put in a location, but it's not really great when you're looking for compound things. So that's where you might have heard the term Boolean operators before. So what a Boolean operator is, it's using things like and, or, not, but in order to put together a series of words or terms to get exactly what it is you're looking for. And I'm going to show you a couple examples of that in just a second. We're familiar with quotation marks. There are a lot of genealogy websites that you can utilize question marks in order to limit your results to just that. Google is the exact same way. I'm going to talk about that in just a second and show you an example to that as well. But one thing I want you to keep in mind is that Google limits your results to North America. So when you're in and you're looking for Polish websites or Brazilian websites or Russian websites or UK websites, the results that it's going to give you are those websites that have a .com or a US. Or if I wanted to do Canadian research, for example, I would have to go in and I would have to put google.ca for Canada in order to make sure that I'm getting Canadian websites. So keep that in mind when you're searching and a site exists, or there's a piece of information out there and you're just striking out and you're not finding it. The reason is probably because it's only showing you US extensions in US Google sites. So I did a search on John Smith. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm obsessed with Jamestown and colonial America, particularly Roanoke. So I just went out to Google and I did a search on Governor John Smith. And you could see that it gives me just a ridiculous number of results. So it shows me up at the top Wikipedia page, shows me the historic Jamestown Foundation and sites like that. But what happens if I have an ancestor named John Smith, which I particularly do? I have an ancestor whose name is John A. Smith. What happens if I was looking for somebody other than John Smith, the governor? So there's ways that you can play around with Google to kind of limit your results, kind of reduce your results so that you're getting specifically what you look for. So if I just put in John Smith, it's giving me all of these results because it's looking for John and Smith. So if I went in and put in John Smith and governor, you see that my results drastically decrease because it's looking for those two things, John Smith and governor, together in my search results. But it's still 56 million results. So what else can I do? So I can limit it even further by putting John Smith in quotation marks, because John Smith is the person that I'm looking for, and he happens to be governor. So I can go in and I can say, okay, I don't just want John and Smith and governor. I want specifically John Smith, and he's potentially a governor. And you see that my results get even smaller from that point as well. Like I said, I have a John Smith in my family who was a newspaper reporter out of Iowa. What happens if I wanted results that had absolutely nothing to do with John Smith as governor? Google is very unusual in the fact that not as the Boolean operator does not work. So if you want to exclude somebody from your search, you have to put the minus symbol and then the term that you want to exclude. You cannot put in not. So I wouldn't be able to put in John Smith in quotes, not in capitals, and then governor. I would have to put, as you see here, John Smith in quotes and then minus governor. And you see my results drop even more. I get a completely different set of search results. But I still get Captain John Smith because Captain John Smith was a captain, you know, he was an explorer and he was also governor. So those results where he comes up listed as only governor get taken out, but he still shows up in my search results because of the fact that he had many terms, he wore many hats. Keep quotation marks in mind too when you're looking for specific things, but then the caveat to that is, like, let's say I'm looking for John Smith. Let's say that I know my John Smith's middle initial was A. So I could go in and put in quotes, John A. period Smith in quotes and get a set of results. But you're also at the mercy of how they list themselves and how they're recorded in other records. So here's where you have to play around with what you know. So I could put in John A. period Smith in quotes and do a search. And I'm going to get a different set of results than if I put in his full name. So if I put in John Allen Smith, I'm going to get a different set of results because some records he might be listed by his middle initial, some letters he might be listed by his full name, and in some records he's just listed as J. period A. period Smith. So when I use those quotation marks, you have to keep in mind that it's only going to find the things specific to what you put in those quotes. So if you know somebody went by initials, you want to use those. If you know they went by their full name, you want to make sure you include those. A name like Allen can get spelled different ways as well. So you need to keep playing with it, and you're going to constantly keep getting different numbers of search results in different hits because of the different way those records are going to show up when you use quotes. So I did a search on Dr. Seuss, all the places you'll go, you know, considering that, you know, graduation season is upon us. This was a very popular book to be given to graduates as they're starting out in the world. So if I do a search on, oh, the places you'll go in quotation marks, you could see I get about 7 million results. Shows me images. I can buy the book under shopping. I can watch videos about people reading the book or illustrations of the book. So when you're looking for things like poems or quotes or specific journal articles, for example, I'll touch briefly on Google Scholar in just a minute, but let's say you know somebody is referenced in, you know, the history of Macon County. You can go in and put in quotes, you know, history of Macon County. Or if you know that they're referenced in a journal article in the Illinois State Genealogical Society Quarterly or the National Genealogical Society magazine, you could put the name of that article in quotation marks and it should bring up specifically what you're looking for. So if you've ever been frustrated because you're looking for a book or you're looking for an article or a newspaper and you're striking out and you can't figure out why, sometimes it's really just as simple as putting that title or that article title in quotes and you'll see your results change dramatically. Has anybody not Googled their family tree? I always joke, you guys know me, I'm like a rash all over the internet. I put in my name and I come up all over the place. Googling your family tree is only as good, as I mentioned earlier, as the terms that you're using. So if I were to go in and put in Smith family genealogy, Google is not looking for Smith family ancestry, Smith family heraldry, you know, Smith family tree. It's not looking for any of those terms. Or for example, think of, I use this example a lot. Think of, you go to a cemetery and you're talking about a headstone. You can say headstone, you could say grave marker, you could say monument. There's a variety of different ways to say the same thing. And Google can't process that for you. It's only going to spit out results based on specifically what you've asked it. So occasionally I will use other sites. I will use sites like Yippee or Bing because they do what's called clouding or clustering. So if I go into someplace like Yippee and I put in Smith family genealogy, it's going to break it down into topics and then ask me, did you mean, and give me categories. And I'm going to show you a screenshot of that in just a second. So it's not as robust as Google. The web crawlers aren't as prolific as Google, but sometimes it is a great way to figure out, oh, I never thought of that term or that word or that use of that specific phrase. So sometimes I can then take those subjects or the categories that they give me in Yippee or Bing and then go back in and do a more specific search in Google using the and the not and the but and or the or. They also still have images, they have maps, they have blogs, they have all of the same things that you would find. What I love about Yippee is there's no advertising. You know, it's kind of like what Google was back in the day when Google started. So you could see on my screen, I did a search for Smith family genealogy. I did not put it in quotes. I did not say and genealogy. But what you see off to the side there are those clusters, those categories. So there are 61 websites out there that Yippee found specifically to Smith family genealogy. There are 12 web pages for DNA. There are 18 blogs. There are 12 publishing, maybe either firms or articles or books that are written about the Smith family's genealogy. There's a Smith family farm. Obviously, there are 8 different websites that reference the farm. Smith Family Genealogical Society, I get 10 different results. So what I really love about using something like Yippee or Bing is the fact that it helps me think of things I might not have thought of, but it's also a great way to cluster that research for me so I can get exactly to what I'm looking for. And just sadly, you know, Google just can't do that. But again, like I was talking about quotation marks, it works the exact same way, whether you're using Yippee or you're using Bing. I go in and I do a search on Library of Congress in quotation marks. It gives me my 21 million results, but then it asks me, do I want photographs out of the Library of Congress? Do I want the film that's digitized, the film reels that are available through Library of Congress, the Copyright Office? So it gives me a very tailored, specific searches to what I'm doing. So I really like sites like Yippee and Bing. I realize they will never overtake sites like Google, but sometimes it gives me just what I need in order to get where I'm going. So now what about the things that I think Google does really well? I think they do Google Books, access to free materials online really well. Like I said, we'll get into the specifics now of using their newspapers, using their maps. I think maybe some of you will be, you know, as excited as I am about some of these features that you might not have played with before. If you have a Gmail account, you already have access to all of these different features. If you don't have a Gmail account, you can still sign up and get a Google account so that you can save your searches. So not only can you save your searches, you could save the books that you find, you can save images that you find, you can create photo albums and photos, you can, you know, save, you know, all different kinds of things. And the advantage to having an account with Google is the fact that I might find books that I can't download and keep, but that I can save into my Google account and I can read them anytime I want to read them. So that's the advantage to signing up for a free account. Google Books is phenomenal. There are millions upon millions of different titles. If you've ever used it before, you've run into books that are within copyright, which means you can't download the whole book and have it for free, but they'll show you exactly where your phrase or the surname or whatever you put into your search term shows up in the book. And sometimes it shows you half a page or the full page so that you can see where it is in the book and then potentially either buy it online or request it from our library through interlibrary loan, but it'll allow you to at least see the information to see if you're on the right track. So that's where having a sign into Google comes in handy, is because it allows you to see those things that and save those things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to save if you weren't already logged in. Almost all of the books that they have in here are fully text searchable with OCR technology. So you would be able to pull up the book and then search inside of it to see if it has exactly what you're looking for. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to walk you through how to make that work. So I am a terrible speller. I will change what I want to say in a birthday card if I can't remember how to spell something. And I don't know if any of you are like me, but I constantly misspell things when I'm typing into Google. So I mistyped suggestions when I went to put in the title of the book that I was looking for. And luckily for me, Google caught that and said, "Did you mean?" and fixed it for me. But this is an actual book. There's a book that's called Suggestions to Homesteaders and Persons Desiring to Make Homesteads in the Midwest. So when I do a search in Google, across the header, I can look at, like I said, I can look for shopping, I can look for images, I can look for different things. Books is one of them. So if I went straight to books, It alleviates all of those web pages of somebody referencing the book or citing the book in their genealogy and takes me directly to it so that I can read the text. If it has already been digitized, you will see the link right in the title. So you could see right at the top in green that it's available through Google Books. There are multiple editions of it. So there are multiple book links because maybe University of Michigan uploaded it and then maybe Oklahoma State uploaded it, and each one comes with its own individual tag. Always look at more than one copy because as we can see with the first title, they scanned it in black and white. And if there are any plates or if there are any images in it, the quality might not be as crisp. But if we look at the one below it, we see that it was scanned in color. And you could tell the difference just by looking at the thumbnail of the image next to the title. But if you see a green hyperlink, it means that that book has already been digitized and it's already available for you to view straight through Google Books. So I click on that top link. It brings me to the information about the page. Like I said, if I'm signed in already, I can add it to my library, to my bookshelf, so that I can view it later or reference it anytime that I want. I can read it. So if I click on read this ebook, it's going to ask me, how do I want to read it? How is it available? So I can download it as an EPUB. I can download it as a PDF. If I want to download it to a device, it gives me the instructions on exactly how to do that. Or I can just browse it straight through Google Books without ever having to download it specifically to my computer or to my device. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on Read eBook, and it's going to take me to the 40-page document so that I can go through it page by page by page. But one thing you'll notice if you had looked at my screen at the bottom, it gives me suggestions. So it'll say, hey, you've been interested in this particular title. Here are some other titles that you might like as well. I'm going to show you a screenshot of that in just a second. So I've saved it to my bookshelf. You can see all of the things that I have already saved to my bookshelf. So you can see that I've got things on George Washington and the Cochrane family and stuff like that. It always keeps a running list for you. I have mine set to private. There are lots of organizations, genealogical societies, and libraries that have their books available so that other people can find them and utilize them. I have mine private just to me. But when you are in Google Books and you are signed in, you can find your bookshelf and get back to where you were by clicking on the wheel in the upper right-hand corner. But let's say I want to look for something very specific. So like I told you, I did a search just on Google for, the places you'll go, and it gave me all of the different results for that particular Dr. Seuss book. But let's say I want to look for something that's maybe not as popular or maybe a little bit more obscure and harder to find. If you haven't used their advanced book search before, it is definitely worth taking the time to look for those really, really hard, maybe rare prints of family genealogies or journals that are no longer in publication. So if I go into advanced book search, I can go in and then get a sheet like this. It's kind of similar to what you would see if you were using Internet Archive's advanced search. So I can go in and tell it exactly what it is that I'm looking for. So I know that there was a book that was written by John J. Pershing about the history of his life before World War I. So I can go in and put for the author specifically that I am looking for John J. Pershing. Or if I know who the publisher was, the language that it was written in, if you have the specific ISBN or ISSN, if it's a journal or a magazine, I can put that specific information directly in, and it's going to give me my results. So you see in the bottom corner, it brings up the book that I was looking for, My Life Before the War, 1816 to 1917, and you see in green it has a hyperlink so that it is there for me to download and read anytime that I'm interested in reading it, and then I would be able to add it into my bookshelf and save it for future reference. So using advanced book search can be really, really useful for looking for those things that are really hard to find. Like I said, Google can't think for you. It can only utilize the information that you put in. So if you just go to the main Google search page and I put in John J. Pershing, I'm going to get practically a billion different references to him as a man, him as a general, him in the military, him as a private citizen, but I might not specifically get this book. So by going into Google Books, specifically searching for only books that he has written, I get exactly what I'm looking for much, much faster than if I was just trying to do a general Google search. Like I said, it gives me recommendations as well. So I was just searching for a book on homesteaders a couple of minutes ago. I saved that to my bookshelf, and then it says, oh, by the way, here are some similar titles that you might enjoy. So circular from the General Land Office showing manner of proceedings, blah, 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 blah. I can download this ebook. I can read it online. I can save it to my bookshelf to read later. But you can see, based on what I've read previously, it's giving me suggestions similar to the titles that I've already read. So I do a lot of research in Scotland, in Ayrshire County. So it's showing me other books that are digitized about the history of Ayrshire, you know, Encyclopedia of Illinois. It's giving me similar titles. And again, you can see those formats. I can see it's available to read online. I can see that it's available as an EPUB to download to a tablet or an iPad, but it's not available in other formats, and you can see those right on the screen. So I love the fact that it kind of gives me suggestions of titles that I might not have even have known existed. So it can really advance your research. If I'm looking for the Smith family genealogy, I know that, let's say George Smith put out a family history in 1917. It might also find 3 or 4 other Smith genealogies that reference the same family, and it's going to come up in my suggestions. So we've all used Google Maps to drive by grandma's house. We've used Street View to maybe, you know, do a from home drive by of our old grade school, or, you know, maybe the first place that we worked. But there's a lot of other additional features to Google Maps that you might not be aware of. I mean, how many of you knew that you could build your own maps? You can follow your family's migration pattern across the world and across the US and build that, create your own map for that. Or that you can take all of the different addresses where your family lived in a city directory and then pin all of those addresses on a map to see exactly how close together they may have lived from one apartment to the next, from year to year. So there's a lot of really, really cool things that you can do. You can measure as the crow flies to see exactly how far apart 2 points are. And I'll show you a screenshot of that in just a couple of minutes. They've got some cool interactive 3D imagery that you can do, where you can drill down and look inside buildings. I'm going to show you a screenshot of that. And then, of course, Google Street View. What's neat about Google Street View is that it goes all the way back to when it started. So if they drove by in July of 2008, but it was summer and the tree is in full bloom, so it's obstructing the view of the house, you can check and see if maybe they did another Google Street View in 2010 or 2014 that they maybe did in winter or fall, and there's no leaves on the trees, and you might get a better view of that particular structure. So you always want to go and look at the different images that they have, because you might have a much better view of one than the other. Plus, times change. Buildings get torn down, buildings get renovated. So Google Street View is a great way to see those changes year by year as they're driving by, recording those particular structures. So when you go to Google and you go to Google Maps, we've all seen this. It shows you where your current location is. So it gives me a view of downtown Plainfield. If I were to keep zooming in, I would start to see more little dots. You know, I see the Opera House building, I see the Masonic Block, I see Lake Renwick. But if you haven't clicked on the little hamburger to the left next to where it shows you the address where you're starting, the point where you're starting, you miss out on all of these extra features that are available on Google Maps. So again, your timeline, you can build a timeline, you can add your own contributions. So I've added photos over the years to different buildings, historic photos that'll view side by side with a modern image. You can change how you want to view it. You could do a satellite view, so you're looking at it from above, so you can see all the buildings and the trees and the cars. You could see how the traffic patterns are at any given time. So there's a lot of extra little things that you can do by clicking on that little hamburger, those 3 bars, that can really advance how you're searching. So I zoomed in a little bit, and you can see I start to get a lot more things populated on my map. Hazel Marie's School of Rock, Cornerstone Church. But I was talking about that maps GL, where you can kind of see that 3D imagery. It's like a dollhouse of the library. So you can see directly inside on the first floor of the library building. So you can see where our Holtz pickups are, where the original library is, where the large print and the books on CD is. So it really gives you a chance to see inside buildings, how they're laid out, how they're designed. But then you also see the buildings next to us. So you can see the Plymouth Congregational Church will show you the structure of the building. You can see the peaks and the valleys of the roofs. Same thing with the Tawny Tortoise and the Loft Hair Salon. It's really cool when you're looking at cities like Boston, because you can get a really good view from above of the Athenaeum and all of the peaks and valleys to the roof of that building. But it's really cool when, like I said, like a dollhouse, you can lift off the roof and look inside and see exactly how a building is laid out or structured. I talked about as a crow flies, so you can measure between points. My husband and I argue a lot over, which route is faster to get to the grocery store from our house. So I won. So I like to go down Wolf Road and up. He likes to go across. So you can actually measure points on a map. And I'll show you another example of this in just a second. So if you were to right click on the map, it would bring up a little box, and like the fourth option down would be measure distance. So when you click on that, you're going to click on your map and it's going to be a starting point. And then you move your mouse around and it's going to draw a line from point A to point B so you can see how far it is from one point to another. But don't let that dissuade you. Don't think that everything has to be drawn in a straight line. I'm a creature of habit. I like to go to Front Street Cantera a lot for lunch. So if I draw a line from the library directly to Front Street Cantera as the crow flies at a diagonal, once I've drawn my point, you can grab that line anywhere and stretch it. So you don't have to just stay in a straight line. Here I bent it into an L so I can measure exactly how far it is. It's 1,011 feet for me to get from my front door. So if you're measuring a location, let's say a river, and you're trying to figure out how long it took them or how far it was, you can pull that line as many times as you like to follow the curves and the ebbs and the flows of the path that you're following. I'm going to show you an example of that in just a second as well. You can save this. You can create your own Google map and save this. You can have it give you directions to that particular place. So if I was creating a map of all of the places where my great-grandfather lived in the US, I can then get directions between those points if I wanted to drive there. So there's a lot of different features you can play around with in this. Google Street View, like I said, I absolutely love the fact that I can drive past grandma's old house, that I can drive past my grade school if I wanted to. I use this a lot before I travel. So before I went to Scotland, I did a Google Street View drive-by of Finnick Presbyterian Church. And what's neat about it is as you drive on, as you're viewing Google Street View, I can actually read the names on some of these headstones. So it could be a lot of fun, so that if I'm going to go to Boston, let's say, as a previous example, and I'm going to go to the Boston Public Library, it's a pretty distinguishing building. You know it when you get to it. But if I was going to someplace like the New England Genealogical and Biographical Society, it's a less descriptive building, and I might drive right past it or walk right by it if I don't know what I'm looking for. So that's where Google Street View comes in handy. I know exactly what the building is going to look like before I get there. And then I can take a screenshot of this, or I can save this information for later. And like I said, you'll always see a little slider, so I can see different variations. They've driven past Finnick Church 3 different times, so I can see those on the slider, and I can rotate back and forth between them. Like I said, you can create your own map. So I can go to Google Maps. I can tell it, here's the exact link. So if you wanted to go to my maps, you can easily do that and get started, but you have to have an account. So if you have a Gmail account, you're already set up. If you've got a Google account, you're already set up. But if you wanted to do it and you don't have an account yet, you would need to sign up for one, and they're free. Once I have created my account and I've signed in, then it asks me what do I want to do. So I'll click on your places to begin pinning them to a map. So like I said, my great-grandfather he worked for the railroad, so he lived all over the United States. So I went in, and in the search bar, I can search for Taycheedah, Wisconsin, St. Paul, Minnesota, Moorhead, Minnesota, Lynxville, Wisconsin, Reedstown, which is where my grandpa was born. And when it searches for the word, I can then click on the word and it'll pin it to my map. So all these little blue marks are all of the places where my great-grandpa George lived throughout the course of his life. And it saves it on a map platform for me. You can add different layers, so you could do different people. So I could have one map layer for George. I could have another map layer for his brothers or his parents, or maybe his wife if she moved around a lot before they got married. So there's different ways that you can construct a map. Like I said, if I wanted to do all the places where my Cairns and my Clarks lived on the south side of Chicago, I could do that as well. You would just zoom in and you would pin them, you'd click on them on the map, and you would be able to do the exact same thing on a much smaller scale than what I'm doing here with the Midwest. Like I said, he lived in Oswego, New York, so that's why I had to zoom out a little bit so you could see the one little pinpoint all the way out here in Oswego, and then the cluster of all of them within the Midwest. Remember what I said about pulling and stretching that line so I could see different places? So I know that my great-grandpa George, his parents, Robert and Abigail, got married in Schenectady. The last of their children were born in Oswego, New York. So I can plot on a map where the different children are born, and then I can draw my line and then stretch back and forth to follow the road or the route that they might have taken in order to get from their starting point to their end point. So I can see that it's 159 miles to get to Cortland from Schenectady. If I drew that in a straight line, it would be considerably shorter. But obviously, I want to follow the route or the pattern that they used in the records that I found. So just by clicking on that ruler, on that line that I created, I can stretch and bend and pull that in any fashion I need to in order to get it to conform to the route that I want to create. It's not always 100% user-friendly. Sometimes, I'll mess up a map by dragging or clicking on the wrong place, and I find that I, can't get back to where I need to go. They really do have some fantastic help pages associated with the maps. So if you're just starting out and you want to get more comfortable on how to use it, they've got some tip sheets and some suggestions on how to get the most out of using Google Maps. But if you just need to figure out, okay, I didn't mean to stretch this to this point, how do I go back one click? You can easily use the help feature in My Maps in order to correct or fix a problem that you might happen to have. So their help feature is really, really good and really strong in Google Maps. So Google Newspapers is probably my favorite feature that Google has available to it. The downside to Google Maps is the fact that it has not been updated in years. So while they built this humongous, robust collection with millions upon millions of pages of original digitized newspaper text, they're not continuing to add to it. But that doesn't mean it's not still valuable. I constantly use the Milwaukee newspapers, the St. Petersburg, Florida newspapers, the Albany newspapers. Even though it hasn't been updated since 2011, I'm still getting a lot of information out of what's already there that's not up online in Genealogy Bank or Ancestry or Chronicling America or through some other source. It's not always easy to find. I give you the direct link right here that'll get you into that alphabetical listing of newspapers. A couple of things to keep in mind is while this is global in its scope, there are Canadian, German, French, all kinds of international foreign language newspapers. They're not done by region. So I can't go to Illinois and see all the newspapers for Illinois. These papers are only put in here alphabetical by title. So it can get pretty complicated. So if I'm looking for Aurora, it's going to show me Aurora newspapers, but is that Aurora, Illinois or Aurora, Colorado? Same thing with Ottawa. If I'm looking for Ottawa, Illinois, it's going to show me Ottawa newspapers, but is it Ottawa, Canada or Ottawa, Illinois? So you have to click on each one to make sure that it's the region of the country that you're interested in. And let me tell you, there are some very, very common newspapers like the Chronicle and like the Beacon, where there might be 35 newspapers listed as the Beacon, and you have to click on each and every one of them to figure out if one of those papers is your Beacon. So if you have your city title in the name, like the Aurora Daily Star, it makes it a lot easier to search, but this is only alphabetical. You cannot search this by region. It's also only browsable. So it doesn't have OCR technology. So I can't go to the Aurora Daily Star and do a search to find a specific person, event, or place. I have to browse it just as if I was browsing newspaper microfilm at my library. Once you find it, you can zoom in and you can look at it, but you can't print it. So there's not a way to download an entire issue or an entire page of a newspaper. You have to either do screen captures or try to save it in another way in order to get at that data, because there's not a download feature with this. So here's the A's. If I start at the very beginning, as you can see, advertiser is another very common name. So I would need to click on the issue, the name of the paper, in order to figure out what region of the country that is, or if it's the newspaper I'm looking for. And you could see the issues. Some are a lot more robust than others. Like L'Action Catholique has over 7,000 issues that span 50 years of history. There are some that will span 200 years of history. And then there are some that might just be 6 months or a year. So you look at the Advocate in the second column, there's only 48 issues, but it's only 2 years. It's only from 1886 to 1887. So you would have to click on that newspaper to figure out, is it a weekly? Is it a daily? Are there issues missing, in order to figure out what exactly is covered under the scope of that particular title. But if you scroll down, like I said, I use the Milwaukee newspaper a lot because look at the range, 1884 to 1995 of the Milwaukee Journal, and then the Sentinel itself all the way up to 2007. So you will find a lot of newspapers still within copyright date that Google had the permission to go ahead and digitize and make available online for free. Again, the Milwaukee Sentinel, 1910 to 1995. Milton Evening Standard, 1965. So these aren't all old newspapers that are available out of copyright. A lot of these are modern presses that are still being published. The Mirror from 2008 and 2009. So that's why I use it a lot for like St. Petersburg in Florida, or Milwaukee, because it's really bringing me into the modern time, and there aren't a lot of resources available to us for that. If I'm looking for an obit for a cousin who dies in Milwaukee in 1983, I'm not necessarily going to find it through a subscription database per se, or find it freely available online. That's why this is so valuable, to make sure that you put Google News into your repertoire when you're doing newspaper research, because a lot of these are papers that come well beyond that 1923 cutoff date. So if I find a title that I'm interested in and I click on the hyperlink in blue, it's going to take me to the paper itself. So it's going to show me the years that are available. So it shows me that I've got the Aurora Daily Star up to 1924. If I were to keep clicking the arrows either forwards or backwards, I would get to see if there were any years that went beyond this date. It's always worth it to go ahead a little. It does say right on the title before you click on the title what year ranges are covered. But I have found more than once that it's 2 papers with the same name from 2 different locations. So like if you go and look at the Joliet Signal, there's a huge gap in the number of years. So you kind of have to skip and jump ahead by using the arrows to get to the next batch of pages, because you might think deceptively looking at this that there aren't any issues after 1929, but there might be. You could view this by month or by week. If it's a daily, I want to see all 7 issues. I can change how I'm viewing this show from year to week to day. I can change my date range to just 1922 and see all of those issues. If you click on Browse All Newspapers in the upper right-hand corner, it's going to take you back to where we started. So it would take you back to that page with the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and the Milwaukee Journal Star on it. So don't click on that unless you're done and you want to go back to your list of newspapers. But if you want to view a paper, so let's say I want to look at an Aurora Daily Star paper from 1922, I can click on that issue. and it's going to bring up the paper. So I can see if I look along the header at the top that I've got a specific date, April 16th, 1921, that I can zoom in or zoom out. I can expand it to full page so I don't see the header, the Google header, and my symbol. Or I can see that I'm only on page 2 of 8, and I can use these arrows to go back and forth from page to page. It'll also show a little hand so you can pull from page to page. Like I said, these aren't available to download, so I can't download this whole issue and save it to my computer and read it later. But if I find something I'm interested in, I can get a link to that particular article. So I highlighted where it says bandit killed, 2 others shot. In the right-hand corner, it says link to the article. I can click on that and then send myself an email with the link that'll take me right back to this particular page. I can zoom in. Like I said, I can zoom in and I can see the article, or I can see more of the page, read more of the text. Here's where, if I need to, I'd do a screenshot. So I would hit the print screen button on my computer and I would save this to my computer because it gives me the date. It tells me what page it's on, and I can see the start of the article. If it's a long article, I might have to take 2 or 3 screenshots so that I can get the whole article saved to my computer. But unfortunately, there's not a download feature, so I can't do it any other way other than screenshotting it. But Google News is really exceptionally valuable, and you want to make sure that you're taking full advantage of all of those newspapers that they have to offer. So I want to talk for just a couple of minutes about Google Photos and about Google Images. I have several albums and collections that are up in Google Photos. Some of them are just my travel pictures. Some of them are genealogical scrapbooks and photo albums that I've scanned and digitized and made available out online. Google Photos used to be Picasa before Picasa folded. So if you had Picasa albums that lived out in the ether somewhere, you should be able to pull them over. It should have automatically pulled them into Google Photos for you. So if you sign into Google, you should see your photos the exact same way that you had them listed under Picasa before that went out of business. Google will allow you to upload as many photos as you'd like, but there are constraints to that. So I mentioned here that the image needs to be under 16 megapixels. So to kind of give you an idea of how that works, if I were to scan an image on my computer at 300 DPI and save it as a JPEG, that would be 15 megapixels. If I scan something and save it as a TIFF file, an uncompressed file, a raw file, or if I were to scan something at 600 or 800 DPI, let's say it's a class photo and I want to be able to zoom in really close to see the faces, that would be over 16 megapixels. So while Google will give you unlimited photos if you're saving it under as a JPEG 300 DPI or less, but if I want to upload those family photos I've scanned as TIFF files, it counts against how much space I have in my Google Drive. So if you have a Google Drive account and you've ever saved anything to it, it always gives you a running tab at the top how much space you have left. So just keep in mind, if you're uploading those bigger files, those TIFF files, those raw files, it's going to take away from your Google Drive account total. But if it's under that, you can add as many photos as you want. There's no limit. So you can create albums. You can provide your own metadata. As a librarian, I love metadata, so I want to make sure I put date and time and who's in the photo and the place and location of where it was done. If I scan something and upload it, it'll include that information, the date that I uploaded it. If it's a photograph that I took, it's going to give the specs on my camera and the name of the file from my camera. I'll show you an example of what that looks like in a second. So it kind of builds in that metadata to help you when you're writing descriptions so that other people can find it. If you want your photos to be discoverable, you want to make sure that you're giving it a good description. Don't just say, you know, wedding photo of young couple. That doesn't do anybody any good. You want to say who it is, where it's taken, if you know the studio, what they're wearing, maybe, to kind of help people find the images that you're making available or that you're putting up online. You can tag, if you have modern photos of people who are online, you can tag the faces of your friends and family, and it'll send them a message. But you can also tag historic photos too. So if I scanned a bunch of photos of, you know, Edna Chaplin, I can tag her in those photos. And then probably one of the neatest things, although I don't think it works as well as Picasa's used to, it has facial recognition software built into it. So when I upload a new photo, it says, oh, is this Edna? Because we recognize her features from the other photos that you've already tagged. I'm going to show you what that looks like also. So I have my photo albums already uploaded. So it breaks it down by category. I can search by people, by places, by things. If there's videos out there, I can see all of those different things. I love the things category because you can see I take a lot of pictures of monuments. So there's a lot of pictures of cannons and statues and things like that that fall into the things category. But you could also search. So if you've done a good enough job of naming or tagging or putting a description in your photos, you can also search your photos to find the image that you're looking for. You can always create new albums. You can upload new photos to specific albums. But just like any other type of software, it's all click and upload. So here's my album. This is one of my Culver photo albums that I have out there. And when I click on the album, it shows me all of the photos that are within that particular collection. I could click on an individual photo and it'll zoom into that photo and then provide that metadata for me. So I click on the school photo for Pilcher School, class of, I think, 1909, off to the side. Because I tag Edna Chaplin a lot, it says she's in this photo. And it shows me her icon off to the side. So if I had named everybody in this photo, and I can name several, I would be able to then have those people identified in this particular image. I can edit my details. I can add a description. I can add a place location on a Google map. I'm pinning it to a specific place. I can do all of those things. But then across the top, so if you look at, I can share it. That's the icon on the left. I can play with the color values. So I can make it black and white. I could play with the colors, enhance and play with the colors. I can zoom in a little bit on the image. The info is what we're looking at on the right-hand side already. You know, I can throw it away. I can star it as one of my favorites. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. If you're going to play with the color values and adjust the color, it doesn't give you all the features like something like Adobe Photoshop would, but it'll at least let you play with it a little. Like I said, the more you tag somebody in a photo, the more that the software learns to identify people. So I uploaded a photo. You see it in the center of your screen of a young lady. And then it says, oh, wait, she looks just like the woman in the photo a couple pictures over. Is it the same person? I don't know. I thought one was Allie and I thought one was her sister-in-law, Christina, but I don't know. Maybe it is the same person and they were just taken a number of years apart. So sometimes they give you some good suggestions and you're like, yep, that's absolutely mom. I could spot her anywhere. And sometimes it gives you something to pause and think about whether or not you're dealing with the same person. So take advantage of Google Photos' ability to kind of build that facial recognition software for you. And then the last thing I want to touch on just briefly is Google Images. So if you've uploaded photos into your Ancestry family tree or your Family Search family tree, and you want to see how many people have kind of snagged your photos and put them on their websites, hopefully crediting them that they came from you, you can do an image search. Or if you have an image and you don't know where it was taken, you can do a match like the old memory game from when we were in grade school to see if you can find a match for it. So when you sign into Google and you click on the little Rubik's Cube up in the upper right-hand corner, one of the options is Google Images. And if you click on Google Images, it provides this little camera in your search bar. So I don't have to search by name. I can search by image, and it's going to play that game of memory. So if I click on that little camera icon, I can search my computer. I can click on upload an image. It's not saving it to Google. It's just using it as that first card in that game of memory. So it's not giving it to Google. It's not uploading it to Google. You're just using it as card A, looking for card B. So I picked an image, and I chose an image that I know that we have hanging up in the library. So I chose that image, and then sure enough, it went out online and scoured the web looking for a match, and it found one. Yet, as one of the images we've digitized through the library's website. So I would be able to click on that link. It takes me right to that photo to see the potential match for that image. So like I said, if you want to see how many people are putting your photos out there, you could do this to see what comes up. Or if you have an image of a church and you don't know where it came from, it could be a potentially good use to identify what it is. But if you look down below, you'll get a lot of things that aren't even close. So if you just put up a studio portrait of a couple and it's a black and white photo, you might get all kinds of crazy matches, so to speak, of images that are just black and white photos of couples. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it's definitely a tool to have in your tool belt. So in your handout, if you downloaded it from the website, if you got my email this morning, all of this information is available there. I gave you the link. You can go out to the library's website and download this handout. These are all books that are available through either through my library or through interlibrary loan. You might already have some of these titles. But I'll definitely, I know Kara said there's a couple of questions, and I definitely want to get to those. So I am going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to turn my camera on, and then you guys can ask away.
Hey, Tina, thank you. So yeah, we have a few questions here. The first one was, I'm in the UK. Am I limited to UK in the search?
Yes. Yes, that's what you would be seeing. I think somebody else had another question about Spain. So what you would do is you would change that extension. So instead of putting, like yours probably says google.uk or google.co.uk, you would want to change it to google.com or google.ca for Canada, depending on what you're looking for. And it would be the same thing for Spain. You would change it to google.sp in order to have access to those records that you wouldn't necessarily see coming from a US address.
Great, thank you. You answered the Spain one. Let's see here. There was a question about Yippee. Is it a general search engine or is it solely connected to genealogy?
No, it's just like Google. It's just like Bing. It's a site that's a search engine, just like DuckDuckGo or any other search engine.
Great. Let's see. Can you go over the Boolean operators again?
Oh, yeah. So the three most common would be and, or not, but there are others. So if I'm in Google, I can put in John and, so you'd want to use it in all caps, John and Smith, and it's going to bring me those two words together. Or I could put in headstone or gravestone, and it's going to look for either of those two terms. But if I'm using Google and I want to exclude and I want to use not, I cannot use not in all caps. I have to use the minus. But then I would be able to say John and Smith together minus not explorer, and it would take those results out. So let's say I'm looking for the Iroquois theater fire or the, Eastland disaster. I could go in and do, shipwrecks and Eastland or and Titanic, or I could do something like, theater fires, not Iroquois. So you can play around with adding those together and creating a string. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You could use and, or, and not all in the same search. It gets a little confused if you make it too long.
Hey, Tina, do you happen to have your headset handy? I got a couple folks saying the sound was a little bit garbled.
We'll see if it works. Hold on.
And then we'll go through the rest
fun
of
of my Princess Leia headphones. Make fun of my ears. I don't know if that's any better.
It's still kind of garbled, but we'll just get through the rest of the questions the best we can here. See here. Somebody had missed the exact URL to make your own map. Would you be able to repeat that?
It should be in the handout. If you downloaded the handout, let me go back. Share my screen again and go right to it for you. Can you see that? So that would be the link right there.
Okay. So google.com/maps/about/my maps. All right, thank you, Tina. I think there was a couple that came in from the Q&A. They were asking, when you're talking about Google Images, they were asking about privacy on Google Photos.
So you can set your own privacy just like you should with any online subscription that you have, whether it's Facebook, whether it's LinkedIn, or whether it's Google. You would go up to the cogwheel and you can set your privacy. So you can set your photos automatically to private so that you're the only one that sees them. Was that the question?
Yes, thank you, Tina. And then I think this is the last question about how to find a married woman by using a maiden name if that's all you have.
I'm a big believer, depending on how you're searching, to play with it in quotes in a variety of ways. So, like I might put in Abigail Page and do my search in quotes, or I might put in Abigail Page Middleton and I might search in quotes. If I'm looking for an obit, a lot of times they'll be listed as knee whatever. So it would be, you know, the obit would be Middleton, comma, Abigail, knee, Page, right? So I would play around with the different ways in which to search for that. But if I'm looking, like, I'd probably start with an obit. So I would make sure I put in that NEE to see if it pulls up the maiden name.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Tina. I think that's all we had for questions. So we did record this. We did have some tech glitches in the beginning, so I'm hopeful it captured most of it. But as long as the recording's okay, we will send that out. I know some people were hoping for the recording.